Hello, and welcome to the 5th episode of Caterpillar Nation. I'm Jill Kimball, licensed clinical social worker and private practice therapist. Caterpillar Nation is a growing community of people like you who are curious about the human experience. Follow me as we create a safe space to learn about mental health, mental illness, and mental wellness. We will explore the psychology of who we are and how we develop our best mental health. Just like caterpillars who transform before becoming butterflies, we are also on a journey towards finding our best self. Stay tuned. On today's podcast, Understanding Mental Illness, we will be examining different forms of mental illness. This is not going to be an exhaustive list or examination, but just a good place for us to start, especially given that half of all people will experience a mental illness in their lifetime. And at any given moment, 1 in 4 adults and 1 in 10 children are experiencing mental illness. Mental illness exists on a continuum. Sometimes there's the presence of strong symptoms, and sometimes symptoms are mild or anywhere in between. A diagnosis is made when a client has a certain number of symptoms present and that those symptoms have lasted over time. The information in today's podcast is meant to inform, help us understand ourselves better, but not to diagnose different forms of mental illness. Only a licensed mental health professional can make a diagnosis after a formal evaluation. You know, if you have a friend that is a therapist, counselor, or doctor, you should know that when we're socializing and hanging out, we are not analyzing people or diagnosing people. We are always just really enjoying the company of the people that we are with. We save that hard work for when we're in the office and we can really give individualized time to someone. We try to keep our work at work and our personal life personal. So let's talk about diagnoses that are given in childhood. For most children, diagnoses happen when we see that a child's behavior is developmentally delayed or not on time, or that they seem to be having problems functioning in social or family settings. We look at executive functioning disorders, such as autistic spectrum disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or attention deficit disorder. These are diagnoses that are first made in childhood, but they're also forms of mental illness that adults experience too. With autism or autistic spectrum disorder, we're looking for a certain grouping of characteristics, and they might include problems with social interactions or social communications. This might look like a lack of reciprocal interactions with peers. We might see that someone with the characteristics of ASD may have repetitive behaviors or very specific interests, and it's hard for them to get their focus off of their interest. They might have different ways of learning, moving, paying attention, interacting, and we look to see that those issues are happening not related to a trauma, and that the characteristics are happening in a variety of environments. For some people with ASD, there may be cognitive delays or mental impairments, or they may also be deficits in their ability to communicate, including being nonverbal. It seems to be a new common practice for people to look at a list of ASD symptoms, especially on TikTok or YouTube, and self-diagnose. Well, it may be that some people with autism are diagnosed in adulthood and that they have been struggling with communications and social skills and social interactions. I really recommend that people don't diagnose themselves. If you have those kinds of concerns, talk with your doctor, a psychologist, or a therapist. When we look at attention deficit disorders, we are looking to see that a person struggles with paying attention, with concentrating on activities, with staying organized, with being on time, being able to get tasks completed. Some people with attention deficit disorders also have the hyperactivity or the impulsivity. We used to think that children outgrew these symptoms, but now we see that they just look different in adulthood. In the past, we questioned whether or not children experienced migraines or headaches, or could they have anxiety, or how could they have stress? They don't have any worries. It's just not true. What we know is that a child's mind interprets the world differently than we do. And so what we judge to be serious because we understand serious consequences, a child might judge something that we don't think is serious as very serious to them. And so we know that anxiety and depression are diagnosed in childhood. It's just that those symptoms can look different, and often children have limited verbiage to explain what they're experiencing. So we might hear them say they're very worried, or they can't stop thinking about something, or they're very stressed. We may not hear them say, I'm anxious, I have a sense of doom. Some children with anxiety may have excessive fears. They may need a lot of reassurance, but they also might be irritable and go into that fight or flight mode when they're anxious. And so it can look like a behavior problem. And with depression, while we might see sadness, we might also see irritation and anger and rejecting or hateful behavior. If you have concerns about how your child is doing, of course, pursue a physical examination with your doctor to rule out any medical conditions. A school social worker is a good place to start because you might find out your child is behaving age appropriate, even though it's not always helpful to the environment that they're in. But also, children benefit from therapy. There are other diagnoses that can happen in childhood, and they might include attachment disorders or trauma disorders. These occur as the result of exposure to abuse, neglect, developmental trauma. 50% of adults who go on to experience mental illness have symptoms by the age of 14. And there are some diagnoses made in adulthood that may not show up until a child has gone off to college or is involved in independent living. It can also be that stress can bring on the onset of a mental illness. When clients first come in for therapy, it's common for us to use an adjustment disorder diagnosis to indicate that the person is experiencing mental health symptoms related to a difficult adjustment or loss or change in their life. And this could be something like adjustment disorder with anxiety, adjustment disorder with depression, adjustment disorder with disturbance of conduct. So in those situations, we're also saying that it's our professional opinion that once the person is able to cope and adjust to this current significant stressor, that we will see a reduction in mental health symptoms. Anxiety is the most commonly diagnosed mental health condition. It's one of the most common presentations at a doctor's or therapist's office. As I said earlier, anxiety can show up with a lot of different names. It could be stress, worry, nervousness, uncomfortable in their own skin. We make a diagnosis of anxiety disorder when someone has these symptoms for more than 6 months, and it might look like excessive worry, intense fear or feelings of doom, difficulty concentrating, feeling keyed up, irritable, or on edge, restlessness. It can also include sleep difficulties. So anxiety responds really well to therapy. And if this has been your experience, I hope that by being educated through this podcast, you will feel more comfortable seeking help. We diagnose depression when a person has had a depressed mood, a loss of interest in things that used to bring them joy, low energy, feelings of hopelessness, of low self-worth, helplessness, guilt, difficulty concentrating. They might have appetite disturbances that are either excessive eating or loss of appetite. And sleep disturbances could also be insomnia or hypersomnia. As mentioned in the previous episode, sometimes we also see that mental health symptoms are related to exposure to trauma or unprocessed, unhealed trauma from earlier in a client's life. The purpose of using a diagnosis is sometimes it might guide the therapist in recommending a certain direction for treatment. It's also helpful when a person has multiple providers in their life so that they're communicating about the same thing. Sometimes it's helpful for a client to say, okay, I'm not broken, I'm struggling with these mental health symptoms. Either way, if a person is using insurance, we usually need a diagnostic code, and those codes come from the DSM, which is a Diagnostical and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, but this is for professional use, and I don't see a lot of value, just like doctors say, don't look things up in WebMD. Be careful what you find on the internet. A lot of it can be opinions or people's difficult experiences. If you're in question, definitely pursue a mental health provider. Whether your troubles are a difficult adjustment, maybe you have some grief and anger or hurt over losing a job, or retirement is not what you thought, or you've recently had a loss and it's leading to some negative thinking. There are a lot of different things that people can do to find relief and personal development and growth, whether we're talking about a difficult adjustment, a stress reaction, or mental illness. Often relief comes from lifestyle management, like focusing on getting good sleep. So in the podcast, you hear me refer a lot to sleep because sleep is one of our indicators when our mental health is in trouble. Human beings need a good night's sleep for our brain to defrag from the day and get prepared for the next day. We also talk about healthy nutrition and being well hydrated. When people are struggling with anxiety or depression, it might be hard to get mentally organized or motivated to prepare food, but using these healthy lifestyle management skills is one of the ways to get yourself back on track. Seek out activities that release those feel-good endorphins, especially like physical activity. And this might be joining an exercise class, a softball team, walking. Also, spending time outdoors. For me, connecting with nature, breathing in some fresh air, it really gives me new perspective and it helps me have improved mental health. Spending time with loved ones, friends, our animals are all great ways to have more of those feel-good endorphins. There really is something different for everyone. It could be meditation. That's an important one for me. That gives me that opportunity to have a pause and see the bigger picture. Because often the truth is we're having a bad day, but not a bad life. And if we can calm our mind, we can find things to be grateful for. We can use some affirmations to identify some of the successes we've had in our life. And if we're in a real low place, our success might be that we woke up and took a shower. There really is something different for everyone. Journaling can be helpful, writing out your thoughts and feelings, processing difficult times. Yoga, running, art, crafts, gardening, cooking. Mindfulness is really helpful. And mindfulness is also like meditation in giving you that space to get the big picture, to be able to have some gratitude for the smallest things. It's springtime in northern Michigan right now, and the daffodils are such a great little spark of joy. In the previous session, I talked about creating a list of your sparks of joy, because those are things you can introduce to your life if your anxiety is high or your mood is low. I love to have flowers at my house. Using this mindfulness can help you become more aware of what kind of self-talk is going on inside of you. With anxiety and depression, people can develop really negative self-talk, very self-critical, always having doubt or finding fault in what we do. When we have that negative self-talk, our goal would be to catch it, to notice the self-talk, and challenge those beliefs. What proof do I have that my whole life is a failure? Again, maybe it's a bad day, but not a bad life. When you can't find relief on your own, it may be time to get help. I do recommend getting a physical if you haven't been in touch with your primary care physician, because often there are medical conditions that can lead to mental health symptoms. So start with that physical to rule out any medical concerns, and now would be a good time to seek therapy. Most people find great relief, opportunities for skill building and healing in therapy. If your mental illness is interfering with your daily life, your sleep, or leading to thoughts of self-harm, or thoughts of suicide or substance abuse, or you're not taking care of yourself, your doctor may recommend medication. And there are some good options for medication in treating anxiety, depression, ADHD, sleep disorders. And always we want to start with the least intrusive medication at the lowest dose so that we can make sure it's a good fit for the client. It's really important that you have good communications with your doctor while they're trialing you on medication. Medication compliance is very important. It's sometimes frustrating when people start new medication because it can be a few weeks before we see full results. But it is a place to start, and it can really enhance therapy. Therapy alone is great. Medication should be supplemented with the healthy lifestyles and therapy for your best benefit. I think it's helpful to differentiate between stress reactions that might have symptoms of mental illness versus actual forms of mental illness. So if you are so upset that you didn't get to go to a party and you're talking with a friend, saying that I'm so depressed I couldn't go to the party is it's an exaggeration of symptoms. I mean, what you're experiencing is a stress reaction because you really wanted to go. But when people experience depression, there is a heaviness, a darkness. It can be hard to appreciate that they look out into the world and they see no hope. They're filled with negative thoughts about themselves, about their prospects. They have low energy and it's hard to shake. And sometimes their feeling is, I've always felt like this and I don't know where it came from. This is different than being sad that you didn't get to go to a fun event. And the same is true with anxiety. A person may feel very stressed about public speaking or going into a new setting. But when we use anxiety and anxiety disorders, we're really looking for that sense of doom and negative and obsessive thinking, where it feels like something very important or serious is about to happen. I think I used the example of going into a grocery store and I may only need Coca-Cola and some hamburger buns, but I pass the fruit section and suddenly I see fruit and I think, tropical night. I should get a coconut and pineapple and mango and my family would have so much fun. But wait, somebody doesn't like pineapple. And the inside just gets going and going. And we have these thoughts that feel really important and it can start to paralyze so that you get completely off track. You were just there for Coke and buns and now you're trying to plan a tropical feast. When that's happened, I've had to stop and take a deep breath. Say, okay, cool idea. I can look at that on a different day. I need to stay focused on going directly to the items that I wanted. And so how is this anxiety? My brain started thinking that I might be missing out on something that would be really fun for my family. And that if I don't take advantage of it right in front of me now, that a bigger problem would happen or that we would miss out on something really special. So this is why I talk about being aware of your experience as being so important, because I can catch myself when I get into that obsessive thinking and say, whoa, Jill, wait a minute. It's not that important. And you can revisit this. So my goal with the podcast is that we all get to know ourselves better. We understand these symptoms so that we can use some calm mindfulness to ask ourselves what's going on. Look within us. Have we developed some skills that might help us not have such a serious issue? Recapping today's episode on mental illness. Again, half of all people in our lifetime will experience some form of mental illness, and understanding what's going on with us will give us an edge. It might help us appreciate when we need professional help or when we just need a lifestyle adjustment to get ourselves back on track. When children have these symptoms, it's important to take them serious, and they don't have the skills that we have to overcome. They need our guidance. and there are a lot of opportunities for treatment out there. Thank you for being part of today's episode of Caterpillar Nation. This is Jill Kimball. A podcast can never take the place of professional mental health services. If you're in crisis, please text 988 or call 1-800-273-TALK. Check out my website, caterpillarnation.com, or my new Facebook group, Caterpillar Nation 2024. If you like what you heard, please share it with your friends. Follow, rate, and review. Remember, the journey to health begins with knowledge. Stay informed, stay empowered. Until next time, keep learning and growing. Take care.